Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for joining me. So today I'm going to talk about a few different things. First, I'm going to tell you what I'm reading this weekend. Second, I'm going to share with you my journey a little bit with getting rid of my books and what I'm doing now. And third, I'm going to do a little bit of a book review. So hopefully this won't be too long, but I did want to go ahead and jump on here and record a few things. The first thing I want to talk about, well, I'm going to reverse it a little bit. First, I'm going to talk about my journey with the books. So, we are moving soon, and I've been talking about this for quite some time, but I've had to get rid of books. And so, what I've started doing is taking books and putting them in bundles and selling them, particularly online in my area, and replacing them with books from my Kindle. So I'm not getting rid of all of my books, but I am downsizing a lot. And with that, I've always had a Kindle. I don't even know what version it is because I got it back in like 2013 when we did another move. And I had to minimize some of my books at that time. And so the Kindle, it did well, but I still purchased more books. So what I did this time was I went ahead and I tried to use that same Kindle, but it was too old and I did a lot of updates and nothing was happening. So I got me a Kindle Paperwhite. And the Kindle Paperwhite is strictly for reading, and I use my other Kindle for reading as well. But there were times where I would like download apps and everything, but it was only for reading really. I did have like the Overdrive app on there and some other documents, but I decided to go ahead and get me a Kindle Paperwhite so that I wouldn't have any trouble reading it like in the dark and it wouldn't strain my eyes or anything like that. So I'm going to show that to you. And so here is my new Kindle Paperwhite in this beautiful floral case. And as you can see, I don't know if you can see it, but the lines on it there, you can actually feel them on here. And it's the same print on the front as it is on the back. And then when you open it, it puts the Kindle to sleep. It wakes it up and then it closes it and puts it to sleep. And so I do have a password on here. And so what I did was I downloaded my full library onto this Paperwhite, and I've been using it and I've been really enjoying it. And so that kind of segues into our next portion of this video, where I want to share with you what I am going to be reading for this weekend. So, my daughter and I are reading Wanted, and I will show you the cover. Okay, so we are reading Wanted by Caroline B. Cooney, and so far it's actually a pretty good book. It is a like teen type novel. My daughter is 11, but she loves to read and she's pretty advanced for her age. So she was reading it and she wanted to read a mystery, and then she said, "Oh, Mom, I think I may need to read this one with you." So I joined in with her. We downloaded it from the Overdrive app from our local library, and I sent a copy to her Kindle and a copy to my Kindle. And so we are both reading it, and we can both keep our own pace. You know, it saves mine with the Whisper Sync and it saves hers at different places. So I will be reading that this weekend. I'm on chapter 2. I think she's on chapter 3. And that's because I'm also reading a few other things. So let me share with you the other books that I'm reading. I am also reading Unforgivable Love by Fauna. Seraphonia Scott. So I started reading this book because Dee Dee from Brown Girl Reading mentioned that she had read it. And if you pay any attention to my videos, if you've seen any of my videos before, then you know that I really love beautiful covers of books, and then I read a little bit of the synopsis, but I probably won't read the whole thing. I don't like reading a synopsis. But I did read this one, and I said, well, let me see what I think of it. One thing I am trying to do is get into a different genre of books. I would like to read some fiction novels that are romance, but I'm kind of picky on what I read. So I'm just kind of, touching some things from here and there. I've read a lot of Christian fiction, and I wanted to kind of, touch some of the other types of fiction as well. I have also read like Nicholas Sparks, but I decided to go ahead and try this one. And I believe this one is considered to be romance, and the person on the cover, on the color cover, she is African American, well, black. I don't know if she's African American. She can be from anywhere, but she's a woman of color. And so when I picture the characters in the book, I picture them as people of color. And so I've been reading this. I am enjoying it. One thing that seems to happen with me with reading fiction is sometimes I get a little bit lost about where we are in the story, or like when the character changes in a new chapter, and maybe it's like 5 or 6 chapters later, I have to flip back to figure out if it's the person that I think we're talking about or if it's somewhere else. And this has happened to me. I'm in like let me see how far it says I am in this book. It says I'm 18%. I'm 18% in here, through this book. But something that has happened to me is when I got to a certain point, I got confused about who we were talking about, and I was like, wait a minute, I thought this happened to her. Maybe that's somebody else. So I had to actually go back to the beginning of the book and figure out who the person was so that I could make sure I was right, and the year and everything. So it's a lot easier for me when I'm reading nonfiction to keep track of the details, because I know who's who, and it's more detail oriented than it is about the actual story sometimes for me. But still, I am enjoying it. I am going to be reading this weekend, as well as Wanted, and then another book that I will be reading this weekend, which I am like 60 something percent. I did start reading 2 other books. One was Toni Morrison's The Source of Self-Regard, and I will show you the cover of that. And it was a library book that had expired, but I had started reading it, and so I went ahead and I checked it out again. And this is one of the reasons why I also got the Kindle Paperwhite, and why I do enjoy using the Kindle, is because when I know that I'm downsizing on my books, or I don't want to purchase a bunch of books, I'm able to go on the Overdrive app. There's also Libby, and you can select whatever books you want, and you can just send them to your Kindle when they're ready. And I really enjoy that. Now, there are some books that my library may not have, but I'm still able to, purchase them now if I want. Or I can choose to wait until my library gets them, or I can just put them like in my to be read list. So another book that I've been reading is, it just came out, and it is More Myself by Alicia Keys, a memoir. And I will tell you, I'm enjoying this. I think that sometimes when we view people in society, we think they think one thing, and we find out that along the way they've been doing one thing but thinking another thing. And I am enjoying her perspective and her honesty about where she has been, and her truth I really love it. So I'm about 7 or 10% in, and this is one of the books that my library did not have. So I went ahead and I ordered it, and I started reading it immediately. And so one of the ways that I break down my reading, because I know you're probably like, how are you reading so many books at a time and why? Um, I I have a list of books that I want to read, but I'm also a mood reader. So fiction has to be kind of like put in with my moods. More like when I want to just take a break and read is when I read fiction. And when I read nonfiction, it's normally like on a schedule. And then when I'm cooking dinner, I listen to audiobooks. So in the mornings, I will read nonfiction that I feel is going to help me on an intellectual or spiritual level, or something that I'm researching. And then in the afternoon, I will listen to an audiobook. And then towards the evening, when I'm cooking dinner, I'll listen to an audiobook. And then at night, a little bit before I go to bed, I'll start reading a fiction book. And then, here and there in between, while I'm doing other things, I'll pick up a fiction book and I'll read it. And so this is how I'm like in and out of a few different books, because number one, I enjoy the variety of it. I think it just goes along with how I think and how I feel. And I don't always feel like I have to finish a book, although there are times when I do feel like that. But if I don't like a book, I will quickly just DNF it. I'll tell myself I do not have to finish it, and I'll stop reading it. So one of the audiobooks I'm reading, which I don't think I have on here, is The World Does Not Need Your Stories. I think that's what it's called. I'm listening to that, and I'm a part of the group on Goodreads. I don't even know what the group is called. I forgot. But the group, that's what we're reading this month. Last month, we read something else, which is going to be what I'm talking to you about for my book review. But the other book that I'm currently reading is, the title has changed, but it's still very interesting. And unfortunately, I cannot remember what it used to be called. But it is How to Be Spiritual Without Being Religious by Pat Miller. And the foreword is by Ayala Vizat. I think that's how you say her name. This book is very interesting, and his perspective is very interesting, and I'm enjoying it. And I've been reading this in the morning, along with a few other things, but this has been one of my focuses for the past week or two. And I'm about 60 or 70% through this book. I'm 62% through this book. So this weekend, I plan on reading the Wanted, Unforgivable Love, and maybe finishing this How to Be Spiritual Without Being Religious book. I don't know if I'll finish that, but those are some of the things that I am currently reading. So now, on to what I already read. So last week, or was it this week? It may have been last week. Basically, the next book took me 4 days to read it. It was very good. Let me see. Read. So you can click on the books that you read and it will tell you. All right. So the book that I read with the group on Goodreads is The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead. And this is actually the Pulitzer Prize winner for this year. So I had, number one, when I started reading it, I had very high expectations for this book. And there were a few different reasons why. The first one is because I know that Colson Whitehead has written a few different books that have been Pulitzer Prize winners, and I've heard very good things about his writing. And so I just was like, well, this has got to be a great book, and let me dive in. What I expected, I think, was also a lot of detail. I gave it 4 stars, and the only reason why was because I think of my level of expectation in the detail. Now, after finishing the book and thinking about it, I realized that there was a reason why the detail was missing. So, if you have not read this book, I'm gonna say that I'm kind of gonna spoil it a little bit, but if you have read this book, then you'll understand why I'm saying what I'm saying. So, a lot of times when I read books like this book is about a school for boys that actually closed, a real school for boys that actually closed in 2011 or 2009, and it has been up and running for over 111 years, or over 100 years, something like that, down in Florida. And I keep looking over here because my window's over here, and I'm like looking out my window. But the school has been open for a long time, and it was called a school for boys, or like a reform school, but what it actually was like a juvenile center or a detention center or a prison for children ages like 8 to 18, sometimes 21, anywhere in between. And there were a lot of different sad parts about it. One really sad thing was that some of the children were just like children of the state. They didn't have their parents, they didn't have their family, they didn't have anyone to look out for them. And so, like, if foster care got them, or if they became a child of the state, they may end up at the nickel school, and unfortunately they were treated as if they were criminals, as if they had done something wrong. The other thing is that there were some children that were innocent, that had never done anything, that because of their race or their culture, the neighborhood that they lived in, they just ended up being a part of the school. The other portion that is just wrong is I didn't feel like anybody deserved to be treated the way that it was described in the book. Even though I said it was a 4-star, I kind of give it a 5 because it was a great book, but the 4-star is just because I thought it was going to give me more details on what happened. And this is one of those things where when I was reading the book, at some point I got kind of lost and confused about who was saying what and what was happening. And even when he began to talk about, like, if somebody was running away or if somebody died or something, it just abruptly stopped the story as if I knew what happened. And when that occurred, I thought to myself, wait a minute, did I miss something? Am I reading this wrong? And so I had to like go back and read and see if I was actually reading it the way that I thought I was reading it. And I was. It had just like abruptly left off. It said in the beginning, like, not the beginning, but like in the beginning of this particular description, that let's say someone ran away, and not all runaways ended up well. And then when we got towards the end of that particular story, it just kind of dropped off, and the assumption was that the child may have died. But there was no like definite or anything, and which I can understand. But at the same time, the way that it's written is as if we know, and then you're just like dropped off. So from the writing perspective, I felt lost at times because of this like dwindling off of details that I was supposed to like already know and understand as I was reading the book. And it was as if I was just supposed to know what happened. And I felt, because number one, I did not know going into this that it was based on a true story. That's the first thing. I thought it was fiction. And again, I was thinking that there were going to be a lot more details in it than there actually were. But I respect the fact that some details were left out because this was based on truth, and in giving respect to the people who suffered at the hands of all the people who were running the school and everything. I can understand why there were no details. So I have like a conflicted rating of the book because on one hand, I felt like as a reader, I needed to understand what happened. But on the other hand, I understand that he didn't want to give certain details out of respect, and there had to be an element of not knowing and not understanding so that I could feel at the end what I needed to feel about the story. And like, my husband hadn't even read it, but when I told him about it, we started Googling it, and we learned that this was based on a true story, and it really broke our hearts. When I was reading what people were saying, where they were saying, oh, this is a really sad story, I really thought it was going to get like kind of gory and kind of, it was going to be like a lot of detail, a lot of information, a lot of things that like bring me down and cause me to be sad because of the wording that was being used, and maybe something, not to say that nothing horrible happened, because a lot of really horrible things happen. But what I mean is, okay, here's an example. I read Toni Morrison's, I want to get the title right because I get this title wrong anytime I bring it up. Let me get it. I read Toni Morrison's God Help the Child. And in that book, there was a lot of detail to the point where I could see exactly what happened. It was graphic. And it was fiction, but what I thought was, in reading The Nickel Boys, that because of the story and because of where it was going and because of the nature of what was happening, I was going to get that. It's not that I wanted it. It's that it was kind of an expectation that I had, because I think I just felt like anytime someone was telling this type of story, they were going to give the reader these details because you needed to know what happened, you needed to understand what happened. But like, in sitting down and looking at it and really thinking about what Colson was, from my perspective, what Colson was doing with the writing, I feel like he took us on this journey that made us feel what the kids felt. Like, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of confusion, and even for the community and the society, and even today when you Google it and wondering, did anyone go to prison? Was anybody held responsible? Were there any, reparations? Was there anything done to pay back? Was anything done to make amends with the children who are now adults that this happened to? Because it was for a whole century. It went on for 100 years, like 111 years. It just happened, And really, that is the saddest part. It's not even that the book is sad. It's not even that the details are sad. It's that the thing that is the saddest is that it is true, and that is what's sad about it. Like, I remember when I was on, I'm about to fall, just like, but I was on Instagram, and I had mentioned that I was trying to finish this up so that I could go ahead and start Wanted with my daughter. And Dee Dee from Brown Girl Reading said it's a really sad book. And I was like, yeah, I see that. But what I expected was, like, at the end, it was going to be some sort of punch to like really hit me that was extremely sad, that I would feel like, this is horrible. And what I realized was, it was not the details in the book. It was not the book itself, but it was the whole picture, in its entirety, everything about it that made the story sad. It wasn't the book that was sad. It was the story in itself that was sad. It was the fact that it's true or based on truth that was sad. And it was something that I would want my sons to read, and something I think that should be included in like history classes, and that people should be aware of, because it's something that, like, we even wondered how many schools still operate like this, because this particular school stopped operating in 2009 and we're in 2020. So overall, I think he did a great job. It makes me think I should go back and change my rating as I'm sitting here thinking about it. But overall, I think he did a really great job with the writing, with the story, with the characters, with the information, with not overdoing it, with not making it so graphic that a child could not read it. I think by child, I mean like my 13-year-old could read this and understand and have a good idea of what happened without being traumatized and given so much information that he could see things that I would not want him to see. And by that, I just mean, like, in that Toni Morrison book, there were things there that I was like, ooh, I can't unsee that. You know, like, I'm reading these words and I can't unsee that. That's not what happened in this book. So I really think it's a great book, and I enjoyed reading it because it was so well written. There were times where I didn't want to read it because it was such a sad story. He had me hoping the whole time. He had me hoping that something great would come out of all of this, that something good would happen. He had me, that's what kept me going through the entire book. It was just like, something good is going to happen, right? And then, you know, you get to the end and you realize that not only was he not able to meet my expectation to have something good happen, but it wasn't him that didn't meet the expectation. It was the fact that it didn't happen. It was the fact that this was a reality for a lot of people. This was the life of a lot of young boys and now men who still live with this. And who knows what else more, because he didn't give all the details. And so yeah, I don't really know if this is a book review or just my thoughts on the book or whatever, but I did want to make sure that I stopped and I shared it before I went on to something else and like skipped it. So that is The Nickel Boys, which I would recommend it, that you read it if you have not already read it. Great job, Colson. Great job. I am going to be reading on my Kindle for a while, as I'm like deciding what books I want to keep and what books I want to get rid of, and occasionally picking up. I'm not limiting myself to my Kindle, but it's just easy right now because I am like doing so many different things. But I do have some physical books that I read. I keep those by my bedside. Not all of them. Can't do that. But the ones that I am reading. So, yeah. So, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you will join me for my next video. And I hope you have a really great weekend. If you're reading something this weekend, please tell me what you're reading down in the comments below. If this is your first time joining me, then thank you so much for staying to the end. I hope you like and subscribe and come and join me again. So until next time, thank you. Bye.